A narrative for today? Have you ever engaged in an activity that seems completely normal to you, yet your friend expresses significant concern about it? Indeed, no one informed Krill about the concept of sleep, which left him somewhat anxious. This particular story was exceptionally enjoyable to read, and I sincerely hope you find it equally delightful. Additionally, please verify your subscription status today. If you are not subscribed, I encourage you to do so, as it is entirely free. Now, let us delve into the tale from the Intergalactic Journal of Mechanics and Biology. The human cortical system is a remarkable feat of biological engineering, featuring multiple backup systems along with feed-forward and feedback processes. When the brain sustains damage rather than resulting in death, it is possible to only impair a specific area of function. In certain instances, damage may not be permanent, as other regions of the brain can adapt to take over the responsibilities of the affected cortical tissue. For a considerable period, humans believed that their capacity to regenerate neurons in the central nervous system was insufficient. However, when compared to other species with analogous cortical structures, this regenerative ability is truly impressive. Humans are the sole species known to endure damage to cortical tissue. Nevertheless, a significant challenge exists concerning the human brain, its excessive energy consumption, which demands at least 20% of the body's total energy to maintain its operations. Furthermore, the human brain necessitates adequate nutrition and hydration. Any deficiencies in these areas can severely disrupt the functioning of such a complex organ. To complicate matters, additional memory processing can only occur in conjunction with sleep, a phenomenon that remains largely misunderstood by the rest of the galaxy. While certain species are recognized for inducing phases of diminished consciousness akin to human meditation, they do not exhibit the total cessation of conscious function that humans experience. For the optimal operation of this apex predator, the brain necessitates a minimum of 8 hours of unconsciousness. In contrast to analogous cortical structures, the sleep process in humans is comparable to only one phenomenon: death in other species. The ship was eerily quiet, profoundly silent, with merely the distant thrum of the engines breaking the stillness. This was a peculiar aspect of human spacelife. For 8 hours or more of a solar cycle, humans lay silent and motionless, entirely oblivious to their surroundings, as if they were deceased. After nearly a year aboard the human vessel, Krill had acclimated to this strange reality, which continued to astonish and, of course, slightly terrify him. The first time he encountered this situation, he had been utterly horrified nearly a year ago. It was his inaugural day on the human ship, and he had spent the previous 12 hours alongside Captain B, touring the vessel and familiarizing himself with the human crew. The humans had been intimidating, yet they were also amicable, grinning at him with their sharp white teeth and predatory gazes. They had introduced him to their peculiar greeting customs, which they referred to as handshakes and high fives. To his further astonishment, the humans had promptly made light of their human counterparts' loss of an eye, which was still bandaged and closely monitored by Krill and the other medics aboard the ship. Rather than feeling insulted, the man had laughed and embraced the humor, declaring himself a cyclops. Additionally, there is another aspect to consider regarding Krill's expanding list of inquiries. Interestingly, after some time, Krill observed peculiar behavior among the humans. They were noticeably slowing down. Their eyes began to droop, and occasionally, one would open their mouth wide and take a deep breath, which triggered a yawn. This yawn from one individual would initiate a chain reaction among several others nearby. Eventually, the captain placed a hand on his arm and said, "Well, Krill, that's the ship for you. Now go get some rest. If you have any questions, I'll be in my quarters." Following the captain's lead, the rest of the crew gradually dispersed. The ship became strangely quiet, and the humans had disappeared. Krill roamed the ship, admiring the complex structures and primitive designs utilized by the humans. He had numerous questions and was confident that one of the humans would be eager to provide answers. The challenge, however, was locating a human, as it appeared that no one was present aboard the ship. The lights were dimmed ominously, and an unsettling silence prevailed, devoid of the usual chatter of humans, replaced only by the distant roar of the engines. Krill wandered for several minutes, opening doors and peering inside, but found nothing. Eventually, he approached the crew's quarters, glancing into rooms and down corridors. One door opened before him with a soft hiss, revealing darkness, and what he witnessed there paralyzed him with fear. A whole group of humans lay flat on their backs, eyes closed and motionless, in various positions of distress. Some were on their backs, while others were face down, all completely still. Were they dead? Krill retreated. From the room, his body vibrating with fear, he wondered what could have caused this. What could have annihilated 10 humans without a fight or a scream? This situation felt utterly wrong. He rushed to the next door as quickly as possible, sliding it open with a hiss, only to be confronted by the same horrifying sight. Humans lying motionless in the darkness, their mouths agape, some leaking a clear fluid. Krill recoiled once more. This was dreadful, horrific. What could have gone so terribly wrong? He needed to inform the captain. He had to warn someone. Turning, he deflated the hydrogen sac on his back, allowing him greater mobility to scurry across the ground, down the hall, and up the stairs to the captain's quarters. Even here, silence reigned. He hurried down the corridor towards the captain's door, which emitted the same hissing sound as it opened into the encroaching darkness. Oh no, there he lay, curled on his side, knees drawn to his chest. One would assume his posture was defensive. His head was lowered, chin shielding his neck, knees pulled up to protect his exposed front. Had something attacked him, killed him, while he tried to defend himself in the dark? Clear fluid oozed from the corner of his lips, glimmering faintly in the light. His body was only slightly cooler than it had been before. He must have died recently. Krill took a cautious step forward into the room. It was just him now, and he needed to uncover what had transpired. He stepped closer, his foot lightly knocking against a discarded boot on the floor, causing the corpse to jolt upright. Krill let out a shrill cry. In a state of horror, the corpse emitted a similar yelp of surprise and sprang to its feet. A light flickered on somewhere, causing Krill to stagger backward, tripping over another boot and collapsing to the floor. The corpse momentarily lurched around, cursing and shielding its eyes before exclaiming, "Krill, what the is going on?" Krill tilted his head in confusion, responding, "Captain, no, it's the Easter Bunny." "Yes, it's me," the human replied, blinking a foggy green eye at him. "What the hell are you doing?" Krill stammered. "The rest of the crew, I think they're dead." He was trembling heavily. The captain narrowed his eyes in confusion. Dead? All of them? Were they still breathing? Krill shook his head. Well, they weren't moving, as far as I could see, and their body temperatures were very low. The captain paused, then sat back on the squishy bench with a subdued chuckle. "Krill, the crew is asleep." "Asleep?" he asked, bewildered. The captain nodded. "Yes, asleep. It's when we shut our bodies down to preserve energy or something. It aids in learning and memory, cleans things out, and also accelerates the healing process." He gestured to his recently lost eye. "Very important if you want to avoid infection, and I need at least 8 hours of it, so if you don't mind." "Sorry, Captain," Krill said, shuffling away awkwardly. The human waved, further confusing him as he returned to his supine position. "It's all right. It never occurred to me that you guys didn't sleep. Everyone I know personally does it after some 4 of these scary nights, as the human called it. It's strange, since there was no solar body to induce such a cycle in a spaceship. Or was there? Krill would prefer not to find out. Engineering and investigating their power source with the captain's permission, Krill was permitted to conduct some tests to observe this sleep. Utilizing advanced imaging techniques, Krill managed to replicate what the humans experienced and perceived during these periods while simultaneously monitoring their physiological functions. What he discovered was alarming. The captain closed his eyes and became very still. Initially, there was nothing, but after a few minutes, the heart rate began to decrease significantly, dropping from 80 to 70, then to 60, and finally to 58. Krill panicked, abruptly waking the human with a sudden jolt and an exclamation. "Human, are you okay?" he inquired cautiously. "I won't be if you startle me like that again," the human replied. Krill bashfully released him, restraining himself from waking the humans again as his heart rate slowed once more. His breathing became shallow, body temperature decreased, and brain waves elongated and slowed as the human descended further into sleep. He panicked again when the human's motor cortex became unresponsive. When the human awoke this time, he appeared more disoriented than before, groggy and blurry, demanding to know what was happening. "This time you were dying," Krill exclaimed, not comprehending what the human failed to understand about that. The human raised an eyebrow. No." Krill nodded, recalling that he had only witnessed such symptoms in the hospital just before death. First, the body begins to shut down. Consciousness fades, energy dissipates, internal mechanisms slow, and brain functions become confused and erratic. Areas that were once active slow down, while others spring to life in a desperate attempt to keep the body functioning. Eventually, the motor strip is turned off to save energy. Those who have returned from the edge report experiencing horrific visions where reality and memory intertwine in disturbing ways. Krill's research on human sleep is expected to be groundbreaking. Humans require death for survival. Every night, as the lights dim and the ship falls silent, humans willingly and eagerly approach the void, bringing both their bodies and minds to the very edge of death. Their body temperature, heart rate, and breathing decrease to unsustainable levels typical of daytime. Their bodies become rigid and motionless as they are bombarded with these pre-death visions. But do humans fear this? The answer is a definitive no. Humans revel in their nightly engagement with the void, willingly slipping in and out, taunting the darkness for hours, even as their bodies draw energy from the abyss. Tell a human these facts and they will laugh in your face. They are intimately familiar with death to such an extent that they cannot comprehend the parallels we observe. They do not merely take pleasure in this nightly ritual, they require it. They extract their vitality directly from death itself. The longer a human goes without this nightly engagement, the more likely they are to completely succumb to the void. We, the galactic community, understood that humans are a species formed by death, hailing from a death-worshipping world, and now we comprehend the reasons behind it. The young spend the most time here, children and infants, while the elderly tend to spend less time, as if they are aware of their closeness to the abyss. Humans may not acknowledge it, but there is evidence supporting our claims. The hypnic jerk, as humans have termed it, The text describes a sudden and intense state of wakefulness that is accompanied by a significant increase in bodily functions and a heightened startle response. Some individuals have suggested that this phenomenon is a cortical reaction, wherein the brain mistakenly interprets the process of falling asleep as akin to dying. What these individuals fail to grasp is just how accurate their assessment is. Hey kid, would you like to hear another story? Yes, I thought so. Well, do not worry, you lover of stories, as we have another captivating tale coming your way shortly. Krill had never actually encountered a human. However, as a trauma doctor at the second-largest medical facility in the quadrant, he had heard numerous accounts about them from visitors who traveled from distant parts of the galaxy. The topic of humans was not new. They had been a subject of discussion for some time and were gradually expanding from their homeworld. Each day, more species arrived with tales about this peculiar race of predators. Initially, these stories were relayed secondhand, often through a friend of a friend, but increasingly, first-hand accounts of personal encounters were being reported. While humans were not a new subject of conversation, they were certainly gaining popularity. It seemed that every week, another visitor would arrive with yet another thrilling narrative about the enigmatic Deathworlders. As a medical professional, Krill was skeptical of many of these tales, relying on empirical evidence rather than fanciful notions. However, one fateful solar cycle, he witnessed an event that would forever alter his perspective. It was a slow day. Most transports and stock ships had departed the day before, taking their crews and any potential accidents with them. Krill drifted aimlessly through the halls, monitoring patients and occasionally dispatching a memo to a colleague. This was easily accomplished with 4 independent limbs and 4 separate cortical hemispheres. Suddenly, the lights in the building flashed red, and radio signals activated his lateral receptors. As he turned to sprint down the hallway, the radio signals transformed into a voice. "Doctor, we have an emergency SOS from the UNC Stabby requesting immediate medical assistance." The terminology was unfamiliar to Krill as he accelerated into the next hallway. Species scans identified the vessel as a human freelance ship. Had it not been for his medical training, he might have been taken aback. "Repeat, humans! It's humans," he thought, analyzing the biological map. The radio signals then morphed in the lateral cortical zone of his right posterior unit, decoding an image. The displayed human was a peculiar being, standing 10 units tall, bipedal, with an endoskeleton and 2 attached cortical hemispheres, heavily carbon-based, propelled by a circulatory pump and a complex arrangement of smooth muscle tubes. With advanced medical training across 4 cortical hemispheres, he was sufficiently equipped to execute most emergency medical procedures required. Upon viewing the biomap, he was nearly 100% certain that the tales he had heard about these beings were exaggerated. They did not appear particularly remarkable. Coming to a halt in the main medical unit, he awaited the arrival of 2 supporting staff members as they listened to the roar of the ship's engines approaching from the sky sanctum's rings. "Those engines are loud," he remarked, as the doors ahead burst open and 3 of the creatures rushed in, pushing a 4th. In a peculiar contraption that Krill could best describe as a rudimentary metal chair equipped with wheels, long waves of electromagnetic radiation emitted a burning red hue, illuminating the front of the 4th creature. As an afterthought, he swiftly activated his universal translator. "It's going to be all right, Captain. You're going to be fine. Just don't move your head." Crow quickly observed the universal medical patch affixed to the human's right upper limb. It must be an emergency if they were compelled to bring him in from the planet's surface. However, obstructed as he was, he could barely see the 4th figure, which was painted in slow waves, its neck immobilized by a rigid foam collar. A figure beside it was assisting the creature into an upright sitting position, halting in the center of the room. The 2 humans at the front shifted to create space. He had never witnessed such a gruesome sight. Or if he had, it had only been during a post-mortem examination. He hoped the humans were not capable of perceiving the high-amplitude shriek he emitted upon seeing it. The human male remained very still in the chair, his head slightly tilted back. The source of the red color was a liquid substance that he now recognized as human blood, which had dripped from the creature's right ocular socket, encircling the edges of a sharp metal rod protruding from its center. Around him, the other humans were in a state of panic, emitting terrified little whimpers as they observed the scene. After a couple of quick calculations, he concluded that the situation was too severe. The rod must have penetrated cortical tissue. The human should be dead, either from the wound or the subsequent shock. He had to be. If medical school had taught him anything, it was that brain injury was... It was impossible to survive quickly. Krill discarded his whore and advanced, anticipating that the human's circulatory pump would be non-functional. However, a brief scan revealed that the organ was still active, albeit at a slow rate of 66 beats. How could this be? "Hey, Doc," he exclaimed, nearly jumping out of his skin as the human spoke, tight-lipped and very still, its other eye opening to roll towards him, blurry and unfocused. Another squeak of horror escaped him. "Good, help me out here. I think I have something lodged in my frontal lobe." He suddenly felt uncertain about what to do with his hands. What madness was this? Not only was the human alive, but he was also speaking. "It's impossible. Captain, please, just don't talk," the other human pleaded. "Just listen to me for a second and stop freaking out. I'm the one with this damn thing protruding from my brain." The group around him fell silent. Krill moved closer, still in shock, but his medical training kicked in, and he began a slow examination. "Do you feel pain?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. The human's one good eye squinted in thought. No. How can the... Doctor." Krill looked at him. "The human brain can suppress pain when necessary. You will experience it more once the shock subsides," came the response from the medical human. "You can suppress pain? Thank the Lord," the human muttered quietly. "How did I end up with an accidental lobotomy?" "What's a lobotomy?" Krill inquired. "We'll discuss this later. Do you mind removing this thing from my head first?" It turned out that Krill would have preferred not to know what a lobotomy was. Barbaric humans! Yet he was intrigued. He had never encountered a species capable of such resilience. Surviving any form of brain injury, especially one of this severity, would have led to the immediate demise of any other species besides humans. The sheer shock from such trauma would typically be fatal. However, the human brain managed to suppress the pain and soothe the individual despite the extent of the damage. Following the treatment of the wound, Krill conducted a complicated surgery to extract the foreign object. In any other species, the level of brain damage would have been catastrophic. Yet the ship's medic appeared relieved upon reviewing the scans. The eye socket had sustained significant damage, and the eye itself required repair, but this did not seem to trouble the human. As Kroll discovered through further observation, the individual was already operating with a robotic leg and bore scars that appeared to trace along the nerve pathways and subdermal skeleton beneath the skin, particularly concentrated around the spine. Neither of the humans could explain the origin of these scars, and the captain was certainly unwilling to provide any insight, diverting his gaze and mumbling about military secrets and matters he preferred to avoid. Who would have imagined that these tales were factual? Who would have thought that I would be embarking on a journey with a group of humans the following week? Certainly not him. However, the physical attributes of the human began to pique his interest significantly. He intended to investigate further. Who would have believed in the capacity of a human to endure traumatic brain injuries? Who would have thought that humans could simply choose to ignore pain? What more could these resilient bipeds withstand, especially when the loss of a leg seemed to be a trivial matter for them? After all, even their vessel, the UNC Stabby, was named after the act of stabbing, which involves inserting a sharp object into a place where it is not meant to be, and a body. Crow contemplated later inquiring about this to the humans, as he found it difficult to fathom what other violent acts such a species could commit or endure. Hey, don't navigate away. We have another incredible story coming up shortly, and you definitely do not want to miss it. This tale is drawn from the Drev Chronicles of the Elders, detailing the perilous conflict between the Galactic Assembly and the Drev War. We should have never instigated a war against the Galactic Assembly. We believed that our superior strength and advanced weaponry would provide us with a tactical edge over our adversaries. Perhaps, if we had executed our strategy just 20 cycles earlier, we might have been correct. However, the Galactic Assembly possessed something we lacked: humans. We had only heard tales of them, originating from a solitary planet orbiting a main sequence star in a remarkably average solar system. In comparison to us, the Drev, the humans, appeared insignificant. They seemed soft and fragile, with delicate endoskeletons and skin thin enough to pierce easily. They were bipedal, equipped with 2 additional limbs, not particularly strong like us, or as intelligent as those diminutive V. Their weaponry was adequate, we conceded that, but even with the assistance of their so-called Death World species, we were confident of our victory. We, the Drev, were truly indestructible, standing 10 feet tall, possessing 6 limbs, and an exoskeleton that required armor-piercing weaponry to breach. When the Galactic Assembly threatened to deploy human units, we laughed, for we comprehended the nature of war like no other race had before us. We were raised in war, molded by its relentless demands. In the glory of war, we perished, yet we did not die. Initially, we were not mistaken. We sliced through the humans, parting them like a wave of flesh, spilling their fluids onto the ground until the valleys were stained red with their blood, and their cries ascended into the sky. Indeed, they were a formidable adversary, possessing tactics, bravery, and damaging weapons, but they lacked our strength. However, they returned, stronger than before. They did not succumb. We tore their limbs from their bodies and their organs from within, painting the rocks with their blood and saturating the sky with their screams. Yet they still did not die. I recall witnessing the first creature ascend the rise, marching with the sound of clattering metal, his eyes ablaze with a false light. We attempted to destroy him, but his body would not yield. What once would have been torn to shreds by us now deflected our weaponry. Bodies that were once so frail that we could dismantle them with just 2 of our arms, and backs that could be broken with a single leg, had become so resilient that we were powerless against them. Flesh limbs had been reinforced with steel and titanium. We did not kill them. We granted them the opportunity to evolve. In previous wars, we understood that removing a limb was sufficient to eliminate a soldier from the fight, but this was unprecedented. The humans were not merely crippled, deserving of death. They had been enhanced, and we paved the way for their advancement. They did not perish. They replaced their limbs with iron, becoming stronger and faster. When their eyes were lost, they substituted them with thermal, infrared, and ultraviolet vision. They integrated targeting systems directly into their brains, and when their ears were, they replaced those 2. When their hearts failed, they utilized machines to pump their blood. When their lungs deflated, they devised a bag for that purpose as well. With their feet gone, they substituted him with rockets. No species from our side of the galaxy had ever opposed us, but these beings took their defeat and adapted. Never before had any race considered merging flesh with machinery. It was preposterous, it was insane, yet they accomplished it. They connected electrical impulses to their own nerves, tore themselves open, and replaced what was within. They unmade their humanity, yet still remained human. We could not comprehend it, and now, in turn, they surged through us like a wave, bringing us to our knees and then to our graves. We had only one option left, an option never before taken by the Gare. We surrendered. I recall the moment vividly, on my knees before that creature, one leg, no arm, no eyes, gazing into my soul. Then he extended his hand and smiled. Here was a being we had disassembled until he was barely flesh, yet he still smiled and said, "You guys are some tough bastards, you know that? Honestly, we knew nothing about toughness."